Okay, so welcome everybody. It's absolutely my privilege, my pleasure today to get back into business resilience now, and we're really excited because today we have a very special guest with us, and I'm going to be telling you a little bit more about him in just a moment. But as you know, in business resilience now, our entire focus has been to try to bring into the midst of sort of a COVID landscape a little bit of insight for business resilience. You know, the truth of the matter is, I think we would all agree that COVID-19 has changed our world. And I think in spite of that, there's opportunities for business resilience. And so what we've been exploring, and we've been able to have some just top-notch guests in business resilience now, where we've been really exploring the idea of how is it that we can actually step into a place where we're, becoming business resilient in spite of the challenges of the current moment. And so, having said all of that, here we are today, and, COVID has changed our world. I think we would all agree about that. And so I think the question for a lot of business people is, where do we go from here? And I think that's a really important question. And the question that we want to answer today, I don't know that we'll answer all of it, but for sure, as we've said in this webinar series, the solution is always in conversations. I am so not a one answer kind of person. I think it's important to invite people from different perspectives and different types of industries, and also different types of applications of those industries to come on this show and tell us a little bit about what they are doing with respect to business resilience. And so today we have a very special guest, and you can see his handsome picture there on the screen. But you're going to see, what's that?
Changed a bit, huh? No
Yeah,
hair.
there you go. That's right. So yeah, they had hair then, but I don't think it's due to COVID, right? Maybe it's just
No.
you just shaved it. But today it is my real pleasure to introduce to you Bassem Henri. And Bassem is the founder and CEO of a company in Egypt called 360 Experiential Solutions. And he's actually involved in a whole bunch more things than that, and we'll have a chance to tell you about that in just a moment. Bassem, we met in San Francisco, of all places. This was probably 2 years ago or so, maybe. And he had come to San Francisco to take some certified coach training that I was offering with the Certified Coaches Federation. And, of course, I was impressed with a guy's commitment, flying from Cairo all the way to San Francisco in order to take some training and certification. And of course, for many years, Bassem himself has been a trainer and a coach. And so it says a lot, I think, about his nature and his attitude. And, if you follow the news, you'll know that Egypt has been through some challenging times in let's say, the last decade. There's been, some government changes, and there's been some degree of social unrest, and all of that has a massive impact upon the economy. And then, of course, on top of that, you have COVID-19 in the same way that we have all experienced COVID-19. And yet, in spite of that, Bassem and his team have been able to thrive. I was on your website, Bassem, and I had a look at your client list, and I think that's pretty impressive. I'm not actually sure if I've seen a client list in my days that impressive, and so that's amazing. Bassem, welcome, and congratulations for being here today, my friend.
Thank you. Abe, it's always a pleasure to be with you, whether face-to-face or virtual. And hello and welcome everyone around the world. I know that Abe have a lot of fans everywhere, so it's good to be here with you, and it's good to exchange information about what's next, what we're going to do, and how can we survive and thrive during those periods.
I just love that. And so, I think it'd be great if you could just let our audience know a little bit about your story. I mean, kind of how you got where you are today. I mean, well, first, tell us about 360 Experiential Solutions. What exactly do you guys do there?
360 Experiential Solutions is a training, team building, and consulting company that started back in 2010. So this is our 10th year in the market. We started by having a master license from an American company that does training and consulting. But then when we opened in Egypt in 2010, we decided to expand and broaden our offerings by experiential learning, and that's why we renamed ourselves to be 360 Experiential Solutions. And we grew in that area to become one of the top providers in Egypt and actually in the region. And through our Egyptian office, we've delivered trainings and team building to many countries such as South Africa, Lebanon, Jordan, Algeria, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, and many countries in the region.
Okay, that's amazing. And so, what caused you to get into training as a field, and what was sort of the passion that drove that for you?
I graduated from mechanical engineering from the American University in Cairo, which is considered to be one of the top in that field. And during my university years, I was part of a sports team that is in the church, and we used to do a lot of trainings and developments, and it brought to me that passion of helping people and developing people. And I would have to say that my leaders helped me to discover myself, and they helped me to see my passion. So during my years of university, I thought that I wish one day that I would work in a similar field, something that would help me make difference in the community, and at the same time it would be beneficial financially for me. When I graduated back then, training was not a big hit in the Egyptian market. So I had to, I first tried to work in the oil field, but I just gave it a try for 1 month. And then I thought that this is not what I want to do. And I gave it up and went to work in a training department for less than 10% of the salary that I was having. And everybody looked at me as a crazy person. But I think God has blessed the way. And I grew into that field as it grew in Egypt. And I became a regional talent manager for North Africa and Levant at Hilton Worldwide. And then I was headhunted to become country HR director for another chain that is called Corinthia. I worked in different countries such as Libya, Kuwait, and I managed 23 hotels with training managers and training coordinators in each property. And then after that, I decided to open 360 Experiential Solutions.
And so that's just awesome. I mean, what a great sort of career trajectory. But it's interesting to me, that you would go from mechanical engineering into training. And I don't want to stereotype engineers, because every person is different. But when you think of engineers, particularly, let's say, mechanical engineer, you're not often thinking that that would be someone who might want to build a company focused on training. So tell us a little bit about that, because I mean, let me tell you, where we live, Calgary, I think we have maybe per capita one of the highest numbers of entrepreneurs and engineers on the planet. Tons and tons of engineers, and many of them are amazing people, but they don't often say, "Hey, I'm passionate about training." So tell us about that.
It didn't start by actually discovering that my passion is about training. I think my passion was making difference in the community. And when I started dreaming back then, I had a dream of owning a school, because I thought that only by having a school that I can make difference in the teachers, students, and their families. So I would cover a big percentage of the community. But back then, I didn't have money to build a tree in the school, so not the school itself. um, so I kept on thinking of, so where can I start? What's pretty similar to my dream? And then I thought of the training, and that was the thing that was available in front of me. And that's how I started in training, and then I discovered my passion in it. And then I grew up and later Then I opened the nursery and then opened different companies. The dream has changed a bit, but I think that I can reach to many people every year through the training and consulting and team buildings, and make difference in the corporate life, in the schools when we do camps for them, in the universities as well, and many other organizations.
I just love that. So what sort of training are you doing in these companies? What kind of training does your organization provide?
We do soft skills, so we focus on the character mainly. We don't focus on the technical training, though lately we started to introduce it in the company, especially with the e-learning and virtual learning.
Okay.
Uh, but but we started and we continued to be focusing on the character building and the team building, leadership development, and that sort of training.
Okay. And so, and are you finding that interest in that sort of training is increasing in your part of the world or decreasing? How would you describe that?
It is definitely increasing. I mean, the awareness is increasing year after year, and I think it is still, though, considered as expenses in the company, uh, but it is definitely increases. I hope that it would change that to be to people would see the return on investment from it, and it's. But the fact is that it is increasing. It's becoming essential. So many companies, as they are facing the COVID-19, they are thinking of how can we train our people differently and not just to stop the training. I know some definitely that were affected to an extent that they stopped the training budget for this year, but there is a lot of other companies that are thinking of how can we train our people differently and virtually.
Huh. That's really cool. And what do you think is driving the increase in interest in soft skills? I mean, the interest in hard.
Uh, and this is a, a step forward in itself because it showed.
Okay. Might have a little technical thing there. Are you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Yes, there was overlapping in the voice, but it's good now.
Good, good. So what do you feel is driving the interest in the soft skills in your part of the world right now?
It's, I think, pretty similar to everywhere in the world. I mean, because the growth of a company is not only depending on the technicalities and the awareness of the technical matters, because someone could be an amazing salesperson, for example, but he is not up to leading a sales team, and it's totally different. I mean, you could be very good technically, but you cannot pass it forward to other people, and thus you will stop there. You will not grow with the company. And that's where soft skills come in. Soft skills would help people to learn more about themselves, would help people to grow further and delegate and manage and monitor and coach and mentor and all those type of things, which move one person from just being technically professional to also a good leader and a good manager and a good team player. And that's where soft skills interview.
I love that. So paint a picture for us, Bassem. You guys are humming along 360 experiential solutions and business is good. And then COVID happens. And so talk a little bit about the impact of COVID on you personally, your family, but also upon, your business and some of the things that you're involved with.
Well, as you've mentioned that when you were saying the introduction that here in Egypt we faced other different things than the COVID-19. So I started the company in 2010. That was October 2010. January 2011 we had the revolution, and then a couple of years after we had another revolution, and then finally we ended up by COVID-19 on our celebration for the 10th years anniversary. So we're
Wow.
bulletproof by now.
So you survived two revolutions and a pandemic.
So it's quite tough. I have to say that with every time we're facing one of those hard times that affects the country economically. The first thing that is affected is training, because as I told you, that many people would still see it as a luxury thing to do, not as a necessity or an investment. Uh, so it did affect us definitely. And if I would speak on, uh, especially on COVID-19, I mean that we are affected because it didn't only affect Egypt, but it affected us worldwide. I mean, I was about to open an office in Saudi Arabia just in April, and I've traveled in Jan. I've finalized all the documents and everything, and then all of a sudden, all your plans and everything is on hold, and you never know on hold till when. Um, um, and that was the major problem, because it just affects us that it doesn't affect you for a significant period or for a significant reason that would give you actually the ability to plan forward. So it just freezes you where you are. And I remember that in the first 2 weeks I had anger, and I was really shocked because of what happened. Uh, but somehow I think that uh, I mean, God spoke to me, and I know that in many times we, um, especially maybe in our part of the world, we don't want to mix between God and business. Uh, but I would have to say that I had to. I mean, uh, there was no other way out. Um, and and if I didn't go back to God and speak to Him, I would have went nuts.
Wow.
uh, uh, and then God spoke to me and told me, "Well, it's good to have plans, but you know what? I have better ones." And He just reminded me of how He uh, made us grow in the previous challenges, and at a certain point, I think maybe 3 weeks after the announcement that COVID-19 is pandemic, um, I started uh, releasing my fears and releasing my anger. And though I didn't know what's the future and what's next, I think I decided to let it go in God's hand. And only then that God started to give me ideas on how can we move forward. And since then, we're speaking now 2 months um, after that time, I opened two new companies. I think I managed my team uh, in, in a good way according to the givings that I had. Um, we're starting to generate revenue from those companies, and we thrived and survived as well. And as I told you before we start this call, that we started to get colds now, and things will start to get back to normal. So I could have spent those 2 months crying and staying in anger, and I would have really taken a lot of bad decisions. But I think because I've decided to let it go in God's hand, I think that this time I will always remember as the best time of my life. I have
Wow.
lost 8 kilos. I have managed to focus on my sports, and I have came on in my beach house with my family. We spent 2 months together, playing with the kids, spending time with the family,
That's
uh,
great.
praying, reading, working remotely, and planning. And I see it as a time that we were pushed to use it to come back to what we were supposed to be doing. And because of the speed of life, we stopped doing. So yeah.
That's wonderful. And I want to kind of go back to something that you said, because it really spoke to me. You know, you talked about the fact that you felt angry when all of this happened, and yet it sounds like you were authentic and transparent about your anger, and because of that, it's almost like you were able to release the anger. And then when the anger had been released and some of that negative emotion, then you started to get ideas about what you could do to get your business, through this. Is that accurate? Is that kind of what happened with you through this process?
Yes. Um, I remember that the first week, especially, I was in deep anger. I mean, I couldn't bear someone talking to me. I was really angry. I had many plans, like really many plans, and we had a great quarter at work. We've done really good in terms of sales, and we were expecting to do a, a very good turnover and in terms of revenue this year. But then all of a sudden, everything stops, and it was really disappointing. And and somehow I don't want to give credit to myself, because if I would look at my abilities, I know that I wouldn't be doing it by myself. But somehow I think God pushed me to speak to him. so so I spoke to him, and I released that anger out, and somehow he started to speak to me a bit by bit, and make me see the things that I didn't see in the beginning. And every day was a new day. It shaped me inside and it shaped me outside. And I'm happy with the experience, and I keep learning and growing. And now I'm praying about different things than the things that I was praying for before. I started to see things in its real value, its real meaning, and I think this saved me.
It's awesome. I love what you said, and actually I was chatting with someone else just this past week, and they said the same thing. I think that for a lot of people, and even my own life and my own business, I mean, there's been this tough part of COVID, and particularly, the suffering of those who may be sick, and then I personally get heartbroken over the amount of economic challenges that this has brought. And I don't think it's helpful to deny that. And yet, you know what? There has been a lot of positives that have come out of this, right? From our relationships to maybe recalibrating our business, to maybe even launching new businesses. And so you have been able to launch two new businesses in the middle of COVID-19. So why don't you tell us a little bit about those two businesses? And I just think that's awesome, by the way. Well done.
Thank you. Well, as soon as that happened, I started to think, so now there is a fact that the training industry is affected, and I don't want to stand still. So I started to renovating what we provide in the training industry, in the training company, and I did some partnerships that made us be gave us the ability to do virtual training, virtual team building, and we were one of the first that introduces virtual team building in Egypt, and I would say in the region, if I may say that.
Wow.
And we did a couple of partnerships with big companies worldwide to provide e-learning and soft skills through mobile applications and stuff like that. But we didn't stop at that point. We started to thinking of now what is the deep need for companies, and we started thinking of that probably companies, their major focus is how to manage their teams remotely, and they need softwares and systems in place and mobile applications and so forth. And that's when I decided to open 360 Cloud Solutions,
Okay.
a software and an IT company, where we did a couple of partnerships with companies abroad to provide systems for call centers, systems to manage your team remotely, develop e-commerce for your businesses, websites and mobile applications. And in a month, we did actually quite well so far. And the other company is a real estate brokerage company. Uh, I've always had the passion for it. I did it myself, but then I decided, so why not take it further and have some of my team members do it as well, and it would be fruitful for everyone. Um, uh, and that's the two companies that I started. I always, when I spoke about it with my wife, I would say that, you know what, I think whether those companies worked or they didn't, I think that having them in place, thinking about them and giving it a try, at least they saved me. They made me busy enough not to think of the fallbacks and not to think about what we're losing, but to give it a shot somewhere that I think it will be rewarding sooner or later, but it's definitely better than standing still.
I love it. And, it really speaks to me, when I think about, what did I do in the pandemic? I didn't launch new companies, but certainly launched a whole bunch of new products and a whole bunch of new offerings, and saw revenue growth in several of the companies that my wife and I lead. And I think it speaks to this idea of sort of mental toughness, right? And there's a question here. Avita's asking, how did you manage to open new companies in spite of the pandemic? And I think it's a great question because, obviously opening a company, well, that's, you get a website, you maybe, I don't know, in Egypt, I'm sure it's like here, you have to register legally and all of that. But beyond the sort of the mechanics, there's a mindset that's so important. So why don't you just talk to us a little bit about that mindset that's critical to keep thriving in a time of adversity?
Yeah, I think if I would have, um, I mean, I think I love opening businesses. I mean, it's something that runs in my blood. And not necessarily that they would all succeed, but I think I'm good at opening them. So, and I love trying. I'm not afraid of risk. I mean, in everything that you do, there's always the risk factor. And I always tell myself that I will give it a try, because if I try, there is a percentage of succeeding. If I didn't try, there is 0% of succeeding. So I accept failures with big heart, and I learn from them if they happened. But I love trying, and I always keep telling my son when he plays Super Mario, for example, or any of those games that he plays, and I would tell him it's okay to fail as long as you learn from your failures, and you should keep trying forward. And I try to do that on a bigger scale. So I open things. Some of them succeeds and keep on moving forward. Others doesn't, and I learned from it. So I think the key is calculate your risk and accept failure. Don't be afraid of it. And since I have a company, or more than a company, I knew what are the systems, what are the documents that need to be done, how to do a website, who can do it for us. And technical things are quite easy to be done. Whether you know how to do it yourself or you can get someone to do it for you, that's the easy part. I think the mental part is the hardest one. So you need to overcome your fears, and that's the number one thing. You need to keep on dreaming, and that's the second part. So here is harder than harder than the other technical things.
I love that. I love that so much, and it's so true, right? I mean, like at the end of the day, I always tell people that failure is an incident, not a person. And I think that we will often say, well, I can't do this because I might fail, and if I fail, I'm a failure. But I tell people failure is something that happened. It's an incident. But I am not a failure. You're not a failure. I don't think anyone out there is a failure. And I think that there's a lot of harm done when we throw these labels around, especially when we put them on ourselves, right? And then what happens is we get in our own way. We have a dream, we have a vision, but we can't actually accomplish it because we have this mental posture toward ourselves that says, I'm a failure. And so for anyone who might be listening to this right now, tell us, like, how do you get that mindset? Because I love what you said. You calculate your risks, you accept that some of them might be a failure, and you move on. But not everyone has that mindset. So tell us, how would I develop that mindset?
Yeah, I like that you said that it is something to be developed because I mean, I wasn't like that maybe 10 years ago.
Okay.
Of course, I had something that I can build on, but it is something that I definitely developed. And I think it started up by calculating the risk. And whenever I come to take a decision, I would always say, so what's the worst that can happen to me? And then what's the best that can happen to me? And I weigh them. So for example, let me take an example of opening a company. So what's the worst that can happen to me? The worst that can happen to me that I lost maybe $500 to do a website, another $500 to open the documents, and maybe another $1,000 to do some marketing here and there, and that's it. So in total, I would lose maybe $2,000. So, and what's the best that can happen to me? I can earn a couple of agreements along the year that would really pay me off.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's how I take the decisions. I always weigh my risks and ask myself what's the worst that can happen to me. And I know many people that think of the worst not only in financial matters but in image, and that is the worst thing that you can do to yourself, because if you keep on moving by the wall because you're afraid that people will point fingers on you and say, see, he failed in that, or this or that didn't work, you will never go anywhere. Uh, and and trust me, people will start pointing their fingers when they have excess in their times because they are not using it.
I love it.
So so just don't wait for them to point fingers and say you did it well, because very few will come back and say so. So I would say set a plan for yourself, set a target, and keep on moving forward, chasing your dreams. Fail and stand again. And when people tell you things, I'm not saying that you don't listen and evaluate, but don't let whatever people is saying limits your dreams. Keep on dreaming and keep on moving forward, because you are the only one that will determine who you are, not others.
I just love that. I thank you for sharing that. I just think it's so powerful. Now, I want to ask a question of you because I actually want to be able to tell, and I want you and I to share a little bit about some of the things we're planning. And I know we're still working on some of those plans in terms of some exciting things coming up. But, we have, I'm sure you've noticed in the media, that there's been a lot of unrest here in North America, and I know it's spread around the world. And of course, the issues that underlie that, of course, have a lot to do with equality. And I don't know any sort of rational, sane person who would argue with that. But you live in the Middle East, where there has also been some pretty significant challenges over the years, and it's not so much that I would love for you to comment on the issues here, because I don't want I mean, it's a complicated issue. But I think what hurts my heart as just a human, and I mean, I'm no globetrotter, but I've traveled to 25 different countries around the world, and I'm married to a woman who was raised on the other side of the planet, speaks a different language as her first language from me, has a whole different worldview and different culture and different way of seeing the same thing. We'll be looking at the same piece of information, and yet she just sees it differently. And it's not that it's bad or worse or better. It's just different. And when I think about what we can accomplish when we come together, when I think about what we're able to accomplish when we're operating from a place of love and mutual respect and safety, I just think the sky is the limit. And I'd love to hear you talk about that, because one of the things I've noticed about you is you treat people well, you treat people respectfully. I also think that you're, because you're a Christian in, I think what is a sort of a dominant Muslim country, you also get how tough those relational dynamics can be, and so maybe speak to that a little bit, because I think it's just important, that you give us some of your wisdom, because I'm positive that you've got some perspective on this.
Well, I mean, it's tough to say, but I'll try. I think that we we need to live as human beings. We need to set aside all the differences between us and learn how to live as human beings. I mean, sometimes I feel that animals are even better than us in doing that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we look at countries where they have excess food that are thrown in the garbages, and other countries that are not finding food and they are suffering. We see countries that are having excess in certain things that are not used, and others that have need for that same thing and they cannot find it. But everybody is just closed to share because they, I think we've developed, as we as we were speaking, that everything is developed along the years, and I think that we are developing our countries more and more to be selfish. um, and uh, and I think the only way to survive in this world, and this is what the years will prove, that we need to be selfless. We need to understand that the only way that we can all survive is that we can all survive, and not just one race or one country or one group of people or one religion, but we all need to love each other, and that's the only way we can reach to really survive and move forward.
Yeah, and I love that, and I think that you also nailed it when you talked about the fact that that the need for selflessness is so important, and it's very tough to be selfless if you have a mindset, like you said, where I've got excess, I've got lots, but I'm shutting it all down and I'm hoarding it and I'm keeping it for myself. So how do we get to that place where we start to think about more than just ourselves? Because even when I read your bio, that's all through your bio that you had said that you wanted to make a difference. You went from engineering into training because you wanted to make a difference. And so, how do we get that kind of a mindset? Because I think more of that mindset could be helpful today.
I think that what we really need to do is to put things in its real place. We need to start seeing things in its real value.
We lost him. Don't worry, folks. You're stuck with me. But I'm sure he'll come back. So we'll just kind of see here what's going on. Thanks for your patience, everyone, because I think that was important. Okay, let's see if we can get his video back on. He hasn't left us. He's here. Just going to see if we can. There he is. Okay, perfect.
Sorry, I'm back.
Okay.
Okay, back to the question that you asked me. So I was saying that the key to this, I think that we need to see things in its real value, and the minute that we start seeing things in its real value, then we stop holding to it. So, for example, I will speak about myself, because sometimes we speak about countries and families and other people because it's really easier to speak about others and it's hard to speak about myself. So I will speak about myself. So in many times we keep on working hard, earning more money, thinking that more money is going to make us, me and my family, safer and happier. And then something like COVID-19 happens, and it shows you that presidents die, ministers die, close friends die, and nothing that actually makes you safe. And all the things that you depended on back then and you kept it close for yourself is meaningless, is useless actually. It will not make you safe, it will not make you live longer, it will not make you healthier. It will give you happiness for short periods, but that's not the real thing. And then when you start thinking that way, and when you start seeing things in its real value, only then you will be able to give out of what you have to others, because you will discover that making others happy is what will give you more happiness, sustainable happiness, that will live way longer than the earthly things that we hold close to ourselves. Um, and I think this is something that I learned during the COVID-19, that everything that I thought of uh, as, uh, as something that will give me happiness or something that will make my family safe is actually nonsense. And that's why uh, we need to have eyes that are open for the real happiness, the happiness of giving, the happiness of sharing, um, and uh, and those are the things that nothing will be able to take it from us. Because even if we are on a dying bed, we can still give, we can still share laughter, and we can still share joy, and those are the things that no one can take it from us. So the more we get to see things in its real value, the more we understand and appreciate the humanity, and thus we can live together a better life.
Love it. This is beautiful. And I couldn't agree with you more. Um, I guess just a couple of more things before we wind this to a close. I know we don't have a lot of time left, but you and I have been talking about some things, and we don't want anyone in the audience to think that this is a formal announcement, because we're certainly working through the details. But we've got this idea of a global leadership summit, and bringing together leaders from 6, 7 continents. Still got to figure out how to get somebody from Antarctica. I don't know anyone there. I don't know if you do, but and just the idea of
Find some.
what's that?
We'll definitely find someone.
You got to find someone, right? And just the sharing of all of those perspectives, and the sharing of the wisdom, because I really do believe that it's in many voices that we find truth, and it's in many voices, in hearing and sharing and understanding, that we deepen our own knowledge and insight. And so tell me a little bit about your heart for that. And of course, like I said, we'll have a formal announcement at some point in the next month or so. But what are your thoughts about that?
I think it's amazing. I mean, I always love the times that we spend together here virtually. We get to speak, we get to share. I feel that every time we're together, I share from my heart, and uh, and I think that sharing knowledge from all continents about what's happening in terms of leadership and handling crises, and moving forward is essential for this time, because I think one of the greatest things that COVID-19 has done is made us all one big country.
Yeah,
uh, because now even the things that we're offering just in Egypt, now we can offer virtually worldwide.
yeah,
And we get to do meetings. I mean, before COVID-19, we didn't speak that much, right? So we
yeah.
in COVID-19, we get the chance that we do those virtual things together, and we got to speak more, and we got to plan things together, and I think the world is open now. We're becoming literally one country. We're a click uh, away from each other. We can talk, we can share, we can do meetings, we can build companies, and and I think that that conference is going to really connect all the thoughts worldwide, and will help people to see what's next. Because I believe that the world after COVID-19 is definitely going to be different than before.
Yeah, I love that, and I think it's so true. And this idea that, hey, the world is changing. So, you either flow with it and change the way your sails are configured on your boat, or, figure out a new boat to travel in, or you're probably going to get swept behind. And that's kind of tragic, right? And so, if I can give any encouragement to anyone watching here today, you've got to be ready to shift. And that shift is important, because now, as we know, the landscape has changed, and it's probably not going to go back, in its totality, for sure. And so, how do we ensure that we continue to be agile and to flow? So, if someone's watching here today and they wanted to get in touch with you, Bassem, how would they do that? What's the where can they follow you? What are some of the channels, the options for them in order to connect with you?
Well, they can always connect me through my page, which is Bassem, Bassem Henry, Henri, motivational speaker. And that's on Facebook and on Instagram. And they can always send me an email at Bassem, Bassem.Henry, Henri, at 360solutionsegypt.com. So that's where they can find me, and they can find me as well on our page for the company, 360 Experiential Solutions. So I would be more than happy to speak with anyone that would like to speak. We can share ideas. I'd like to give support to anyone that is in need.
I love it. And I look forward to the time when we get to connect again face to face. That might take a little bit of time, but for sure, I'm excited about that as well.
Same here.
So,
Thank you.
any final thoughts, Bassem, just that you can share with the audience? Because I know a lot of people are grateful for what you've shared and how you've shared today authentically. But you want to leave us with a final thought?
Well, two things, if I may. First, I'm really thankful for that time, Abe, and thank you for thinking of me. It's sincerely a great pleasure that every time we come together, and you're a sincere person, and just when we come together, I feel that I'm capable of pouring out my heart and speaking about what I'm really passing through, and I love that time. And the second thing, for all the people that are watching us, I think if you're still in the anger stage, you're not too late. Just pour it out on God, and or if you can't talk right away, you can ask for a mentor or a coach, and they can help you out. But if you're angry, I mean, we've all been, and that's nothing wrong. So you can speak it up and start moving forward, and that's your starting point.
Love it, love it. Let go of the anger and move on. And so I just want to share one or two thoughts as we come to a conclusion here today. I have been thinking a lot about where do we go from here. I'm sure many of you have as well. And I love how Bassem shared that he had already decided that he was going to pivot, that he was going to risk failure. Hey, if one of these two companies that he started doesn't go where he wants it to go, it's not necessarily the end of the world. It creates opportunity. And so I want to just share with you three quick things here about where we go from here. And if you're running a business, I mean, guess what, folks? Halfway through 2020 has already happened. And so we have an incredible opportunity to have a better second half than first half. And that's not to say that we can control the circumstances, because there's so many things we cannot control. We don't understand yet fully about COVID. We don't know where the economy is going to go. There's a lot of things we don't know. But in the midst of that, I think that there's a couple of things that we can certainly control or impact. The first thing that I really want you to think about, because I know I'm thinking about it, is this idea of destination. What are you really aiming for? And Bassem talked about it here today, that COVID forced him, and I can tell you it has forced me to re-examine my priorities. What am I aiming for? What am I heading for? And I think that's a critically important question to ask. How are you going to measure success going forward, right? And as a coach, I would really encourage you to unpack that. Okay, first half of the year is done. How are you going to measure success in the second half of the year? And, is that about making more money? Well, I hope so, but I hope that that's not what it's all about. I think you need to be involved in your family. I think you need to be involved in your physical health. I think your relationships. I think your contribution to the world around you. And so really encourage you to think about that. The second thing I would encourage you to think about is this idea of developing mental toughness. I can tell you that the folks who have mental toughness are going to do amazing things in the back half of 2020. The folks who don't have mental toughness are going to struggle. And you might say, well, I wasn't born with mental toughness. What can I do, Abe Brown? And here's what I'm going to tell you. You got to build it. And Bassem talked about it. You don't wake up with mental toughness. You're not born with it. It's like a muscle that you have to build. And I think some of us, we keep getting in our own way, right? We keep getting tripped up and stuck because our mental toughness isn't where it needs to be. And I just encourage you on that. And I think the third thing that you do need to think about, and Bassem also mentioned this, is the idea of a roadmap or a travel guide, right? You got your destination, you've got your mental toughness packed there, but where are you going to be going with respect to a guide or a roadmap? And I would really encourage you to consider getting a guide, getting a roadmap, maybe connecting with a coaching program like Healthy, Wealthy, and Wise, maybe booking a support call so that you're not all alone. So next week in our Business Resilience Now webinar, it's going to be the same time, a week from today. We have a very special guest. Her name is Shanna Chow. And, she is a dating and relationship coach, and she operates out of British Columbia. And I think that she has something for us as well, because COVID-19 has definitely changed relationships in a lot of ways. And so we're going to hear about business resilience from Shanna, and I can't wait to hear. And so again, Bassem, thank you so much for your time here today. And one final thought goes to you, Mr. Man by the Red Sea.
Well, thanks a lot, Abe. It's always a pleasure to be here with you. And thanks everyone for attending. I hope it was beneficial. And I'll be looking forward to hear back from you if anything that comes up to your mind. Thank you. And looking forward for our big event in a couple of months from now.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Bassem. Thanks everybody for tuning in. We'll see you next week. Take care.
Bye-bye.